One of the things that's been exciting about the 2020 race is the number of new ideas being championed by these candidates. You have UBI, you've got a federal jobs guarantee, and you have the wealth tax. We've asked the candidates, we've interviewed about several of these proposals. Let's take a listen to Andrew Yang.
Now, a wealth tax makes sense in spirit, and it even makes sense by the numbers, but in real life, the implementation would have massive problems. Wealthy people in this country are not the sort of people that are going to submit to an inventory of all their assets on an annual basis and then pay a 2% toll. You would see massive compliance problems, capital flight, and many Americans even looking at it and saying, wait a minute, if I stay here as an American, I'm going to be paying $20, $30, $40 million a year. Is my citizenship actually worth that to me? And you'd have many people actually asking themselves those questions.
We are back with Daria Dawson, Director of Political Affairs at Paid Leave for the United States Action Fund, and Kurt Mills, Senior Writer at the American Conservative Magazine. We do have to mention, though, before we get into this Yang versus Warren wealth tax debate, is that Tulsi Gabbard, who we interviewed on the show last week about impeachment, we talked to her right after the transcript came out. She said it didn't show a compelling case for impeachment. Let's take a listen to what she said.
You know, I think when you step outside of the bubble here in Washington and you get to where most folks in the country are, look, I'm not a lawyer, but I think most people reading through that transcript are not going to find that extremely compelling cause to throw out a president that won an election in 2016. And instead, what I think most people will see is, hey, this is another move by Democrats to get rid of Donald Trump.
Well, it didn't take that long. I think 24 hours later, the campaign came out with a statement saying she now does support impeachment. I mean, Kurt,
an impeachment inquiry.
Or an impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
I mean, does this just show? I mean, is this the power of the swamp? Is this the power of D.C.? I mean, I've never seen her really switch on anything, and this is the first time. It was almost 24-hour turnaround.
Tulsi's wearing white after Labor Day and reversing herself, so she's breaking the big rules. I would say that she is trying to win the Democratic nomination for president, and Democrats want to see Donald Trump impeached. I think people often look at politics as a top-down, decisive game. I think it's way more bottom-up. I think Pelosi tried to avoid impeaching Trump for as long as she could, and if you look at poll numbers, it's 80, 85, 90% of Democrats want to see the president impeached. Right. How could you run for the top office in that party if you are against that position? And if Gabbard is serious about running for the nomination, then I think she had to tack.
What do you think, Daria?
Well, I can't, fathom why she wasn't for it to begin with. I actually watched that interview, and unfortunately, I am a lawyer, so I could make that connection by reading that transcript. But I mean, any lay person, I was literally reading it out loud to family members, and it's there. I would say that there is enough there to at least start the inquiry, and if that's where she is right now, and it took her a little while to get there, we shouldn't judge her for that.
Yeah. Right.
We definitely should not say it was because of political ambitions. I think you just have to read for yourself, and she got there.
I mean, she has been, though, so consistent and held so strong on this impeachment would be too divisive for the country, which is very consistent with her politics in general.
And actually, if you look at the polling, it's not wrong.
I actually thought it was an interesting strategic play because anytime you're on your own on an island on something, it's actually an opportunity, right? She's trying to win the nomination. She's trying to differentiate from the rest of the group. At this point, everybody else is on board with impeachment, so I thought, okay, she can stand alone here. And yes, it may be a small percentage of Democratic voters who are with her, but it's appealing to someone when they see somebody standing strong in something that is sort of counter to the obvious prevailing winds. So it was surprising to me that she changed, only because we see Tulsi standing out there on an island and refusing to bend so incredibly often.
I think what's unfortunate is that impeachment, like everything here in Washington, D.C., is now a political issue. Impeachment is very serious, and it is not a good time for our country to go through this right now. But at the same time, the Constitution is basically laid out for Congress to basically make this inquiry of the President of the United States. That is what the Constitution allows for.
The thing is, what I saw last week is a thread through her politics, which is kind of majoritarian. She's anti-identity politics. She's against third trimester abortion. She says that some Democratic policies are effectively open borders. So she's not against going. She really is kind of like a 50+1 politician, where she looks at everything in terms of the country. This is the first time that she really. I mean, 50+1 is not where we're at on impeachment, Kurt, and yet everything else in her politics seems to be in that direction. So that's the contradiction that I
Oh,
see.
I think she'd be a pretty competitive general election candidate, but that's not how you become president. You
Right.
win the primary and then you win the general.
Yeah.
She's a terrible primary candidate. And I mean, I think you're more optimistic than me. The idea that you're going to distinguish yourself in the Democratic primary by saying, "Oh, I'm the only one who wants to be soft on
Right.
a deeply unpopular Republican president," I just don't think is a distinguisher.
Yeah. All right.
She clearly made that evaluation
She
as well. I would
certainly
say
did,
that the overall polls on impeachment have moved quite a bit, and I wonder if she's looking more to that, honestly, than even to the Democratic primary electorate. We played at the top Andrew Yang responding to Elizabeth Warren on the idea of a wealth tax, essentially saying, look, I get the appeal, but in practice, this could be a problem. People aren't going to want to submit to having all of their wealth itemized. People may leave the country because wealthy people may leave the country rather than submit to this idea of a wealth tax. Derry, what do you think of that argument?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not a tax lawyer, and I get really lost in the nuances of what it means for these tax plans.
Sure.
I believe that everyone should pay their fair share. How that's implemented, I think, is the distinction between Yang and Warren's plan. But I do think, overall, as a general, that they do have really good plans.
Yeah, I mean,
but I really can't dive into the nuances between the two of
Well, the
them.
wealth tax, it polls incredibly well. You know, the
Yeah.
idea like, oh, we're going to go after people's wealth, and that's where all these assets are, and not income. And actually, apparently,
It's
I
true.
found out you might need a constitutional amendment in order to pass it because there's a
We'll
lot
worry about
that
that
goes into
later,
this.
buddy. Don't
However,
worry about that now.
I mean, I find Andrew Yang's discussion of this pretty elegant, which is like, why would anybody who is worth over $1 billion want to stay in the United States and continue pursuing whatever their entrepreneurial activity or whatever, if they're going to have to assess these like crazy amounts of taxes on their wealth? And I mean, he's plugging UBI, but that is not a terrible indictment of what a wealth tax could mean in practice, right, Kurt?
I'm not a tax lawyer either,
Yeah.
but it's not going to stop me.
Yeah.
I'll say
Swing
that
for it.
I'll
Yeah.
say this is part and parcel of the differing approaches between a Yang and a Warren. Yang comes from the world of business, and I think he thinks that the system is troubled, and I think he wants to put guardrails and preserve the current system, the UBI, give people more money, but not fundamentally shake up the way we do business. I mean, to be clear, UBI would be an enormous change.
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
Warren, there is an element, more than an element. There's a flair, there's a zeal for justice. It is unfair that this country is so unequal,
Yeah.
and we need to do what we need to do, come hell or high water.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say. First of all, let me play Andrew Yang surrogate. What they would say is putting money in people's hands is fundamentally transformational and
Right.
is revolutionary. And I think there's some truth to that. Money in this country is basically everything. It is power. So I think there's something to that. On the wealth tax piece, though, his point about, they're going to move overseas, please. These people keep their assets in offshore accounts already. And if they want to go, let them go. We'll be just fine.
I mean, will we be just fine?
Yes,
I don't
we
know.
will,
I don't
of
think
course.
we will
We have
be.
plenty of.
I don't know if we will be just fine.
Have you've met these people.
Yes,
they're
I
not
have.
such special sunflowers.
No, but they
We
have a lot
can-
of money and they pump a lot of money into the economy. And then, there is, I know it's, I don't want to
Guess
sound
what?
all trickle down here, but like there's a little bit to that. I mean, it's not, you don't want to live in a society where the most wealthy and successful people want to leave.
They have completely
Yeah.
gamed our system to
Yeah.
their benefit, to the detriment of everyone else. If they want to go away, I'm
I
perfectly
think
fine
Yang
with
is
that.
concerned about entrepreneurship,
And I
right?
think he should be.
Like if you're
Yeah.
trying to start a business right now,
Right.
why would you start in the United States? Why wouldn't you start it in Thailand? Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you start it in Montenegro?
or China or Singapore.
That's already the
Yeah.
case.
Right.
What I'm
Well, but that would
concerned
highlight
about,
that.
No,
what
yeah,
I'm-
you just, I mean,
Derry, I
yeah.
want to get you in on this, but
Yeah.
what I'm concerned about is the fact that the entrepreneurial class and aspirations are reserved for a tiny, tiny fraction of Americans. Do you know how much venture capital goes to anyone who didn't go to like Harvard or Stanford? It is a fraction, right? So we have this incredibly elite class, and if their feelings get hurt and they don't want to submit to it and they're going to move to the Bahamas or Montenegro or whatever, we'll be just fine.
I mean, I think this country is heading towards a place where it's the have and have-nots. And pretty much like
We're there.
we are there.
Yeah.
We want to eliminate the middle class. We want a two-class system, and these are proposals that are basically allowing for again those who pay their fair share to basically help all of us. That is what the American spirit is about. Folks came to this country. Well, not all of us voluntarily came to this country, but those of us who voluntarily came to this country came with the hope of liberty, prosperity, and taking care of their families.
Sure.
So there are those that benefited more than others, but again, we're supposed to be Americans, and we're supposed to be all in this together and help each other out. And that's not what's happening right now.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Nicely
both of
said.
you.
Thanks,
Really
guys.
great. Tomorrow on Rising, Elizabeth Warren is running an anti-establishment campaign, but her stances on foreign policy are possibly in line with convention. We're going to dive into why.
And Team Rising will, of course, be in the house. We know you love these guys. As always, like, share, subscribe to us on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Send in your questions to #RisingQs. And make sure, first and foremost, you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel because it's the best. Have a great day, guys.
See you later.